Hello and welcome to this episode of Sales Secrets from the Top 1%, where the world's best sales experts share their secrets to sales success. And I am thrilled, honored, humbled, and grateful to have with me today Brian Porter. Brian is a phenomenal salesman, mentor, and advisor for the last 15 years. We met a few weeks ago in Dallas for a digital inside sales conference, and I knew we had to get him on the show. Brian is currently the regional sales executive at Concur, which is just recently purchased by SAP, and he's been a sales manager and executive for companies like Amex, FedEx, handling over $18 million sales territories. Brian, thank you so much for joining us today.
You got it, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so we're thrilled to dive in, man. The audience is dying to know two things. Number one, how'd you get started in sales? Where have you worked, and what are the biggest things, secrets, strategies, advice that you learned from selling at FedEx, from selling at Amex, and from selling at Concur? And then, of course, towards the end of the interview, the audience is dying to know, what is your number one top sales secret? If you had to go back in time to when you first started in sales, what is that number one top sales secret? So without further ado, man, I'd love to hear, how'd you get started in sales?
Yeah, so, if you look at my LinkedIn, my first sales job was FedEx, right, doing inside sales. But in reality, my first sales job was really working for my stepmother because she owned an insurance agency, right? So property and casualty insurance, right? She's out there beating the streets. So I actually worked for her while I was going to school, and she essentially was paying for these little lead cards, right? So almost like Boiler Room, right, where he walks in and he's like, hey, man, here's your D&B cards. So she'd come in and give me a list of whatever it was, 20, 30 lead cards that people had requested information on auto insurance. And so I wasn't a licensed agent, right? So I wasn't legally allowed to give quotes, but I would essentially call and just essentially qualify them, right? I was almost being an SDR for my mother, so she could then call them back, give them a quote, or get them into the office, try and sell them some insurance. And so that's really my first experience with kind of the sales world, as far as having to pick up the phone, interact with people, trying to figure out what's important to them and things like that. So my first
experience. How much did those leads cost back then?
I don't know. I'd have to text my mom and see, but I don't know. Hopefully not too much, man, because not many of them were worth a whole lot.
Oh, that's so funny. What was some of the biggest things that you learned by doing that?
Looking back at it, I don't know that there's any huge takeaways from that other than just, doing the activity, right? If you got that list of 20, 30 lead cards, do it, right? Come in the morning, eat that frog, do the hardest things first, come in first thing in the morning, pick up the lead cards, knock them out, as opposed to sitting there just watching them, linger on your desk all day, not doing the activity. So the number one thing I would take from that is just do the activity.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Eat that frog, do the activity. It's so funny. We preach that 1,000 times a day about how critical it is. You don't do the activity, you're not making any sales. So that's awesome. That's great that you learned that at such a young age in sales. Was it just your mom, hey, Brian, keep calling, keep dialing, keep selling? Or did you have a manager there? How did that work?
No, it was pretty much my mom's office. And so we had my mom, and then she had an admin that worked for her, and then it was me. To be honest, man, she's running her own business, right? So she's out, she's meeting with clients, doing things like that. So a lot of times it was pretty much me and the admin there in the office. So it was kind of up to me to stay on task and kind of manage my own time as far as, excuse me, as far as hey, man, I got these 30 lead cards, I got to knock them out. What do I have in the day that I have to do? So it was kind of on me at that point, just to have that kind of self-reliance and self-accountability.
When it came to the business, why did you decide to leave? You didn't want to take it over and run it, or just be the number one insurance sales guy?
Yeah, really for me, that was just it was like a job to get through college, right? So she was kicking me off whatever it was on a weekly basis to come in, help her run the office. But that was really just to get through school. And surprisingly enough, I graduated with a degree in art, which I've literally never done anything with. But yeah, so it was really just.
How'd you decide to get into art?
Well, I'll try and condense it because it's not all that exciting, but essentially I originally wanted to be an architect. So I realized that living a college lifestyle, or the college lifestyle that most of us, equate to a college lifestyle, doesn't really match up with trying to be an architect at the age of 18, 19, because you're taking 18, 19 hours of credits. You're expected to be in the studio a ridiculous amount of time, and you're really expected to be truly dedicated to that profession already at that point. And for me, I was like most college kids, where I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was having a good time. I was trying to figure out. So pretty much after, I think, 2 years, I decided, hey, this isn't getting me anywhere. I actually took time off from school. But that was where essentially I started. So to answer your question about the art thing, essentially I was able to mishmash a major together from the credits I had with architecture, get my degree, get the heck out of there, tell prospective employers that I had a degree, which is all they really cared about, right?
Right. That's awesome, man. So then how did you come across FedEx?
Yeah, so right after I graduated, I was working at Dish Network as an inbound customer service representative, right? More phone time.
So you weren't doing because a lot of people that I know and interview, like they worked for Dish and other like cable companies, were like, you're knocking door to door.
Fortunately for me, no. We actually had a call
door-to-door
center.
gig's tough.
Yeah, man. And so we had a call center, essentially a customer service call center there in McKeesport, Pennsylvania, which is in Pittsburgh.
Yep.
So just taking inbound calls, right? So that could be, hey, I saw you guys got the, first year free or whatever. Could be existing clients. So yeah, you're trying to do some upsell stuff. So I learned a little bit of sales skills there. But really, I was making $9 an hour. So really what that job taught me was get the heck out of there and find a better job. And so that's where the internet was kind of coming into its own at that point. I think monster.com was pretty much the main job board out there at that point. And so just started looking for gigs out there, and FedEx had essentially an open invitation where they, almost hate to say this, but cattle call, right? Where there's probably 100, 150 people that come in. Yep. They give you the spiel on, hey, here's what the job is. It may or may not be for you. And so essentially from there proceeded through whatever the number of interviews it was to get an inside sales job with FedEx there in Pittsburgh.
Dude, that's awesome. And to be honest, like the call center stuff is so smart. Because it just teaches you how to sell, teaches you how to talk to people. I did the call center when I was 14 or 15, like calling for nonprofits. And dude, I think that's the best job anyone can do right out of the gate.
Yeah, I would agree. I personally didn't do it, but I had some buddies that I still stay in touch with today in college that actually worked for like credit card companies and stuff like that during college in the summers, doing just straight up cold calls, right? Pretty much telemarketer calls. And those guys that did that are some of the most successful salespeople that I know and stay in touch with today. So it definitely kind of resonates through the career.
That's awesome, man. So you joined FedEx. And by the way, I heard that they've got like one of the world's best like entry level sales training programs. Like how was that? What was it like to sell for them? What was the experience like, the training like, and then some of the top secret strategies that you learned from there?
Yeah, they definitely had a great training program. I think our training program was 4 to 6 weeks total, where you're literally just training, right? It's not like, hey, you should be on the phones for X amount of days. And also, by the way, knock out these video lessons literally in the classroom, or shadowing a mentor. And so definitely world-class training. Looking back at it now and seeing how things have evolved, it was definitely product heavy training, which it kind of had to be, because I think, you wouldn't think it, right, for a shipping company, but I think there's probably close to 1,000 different products that they actually have access to. So there was a lot of product training involved as opposed to sales training per se. But it was definitely world class. Definitely learn a lot, being in the old cube farm, right? You learn a lot just hearing your peers, right? Hearing them talk to other clients, and exactly, man, just hearing them, pick up the phone and call people, hear what they're saying, hear how they handle objections over the phone, asking your mentor to, plug in with your phone and, hey, listen on this call, let me know what I can do better. So yeah, it was a great experience from the training perspective, world-class organization overall. And so really, when I think back at as far as, any top tips or secrets that I would have from those days, was again, probably going back to the activity, right? So they had certain call metrics they wanted to do. It wasn't as crazy as the SDRs do today, right? With Connect and Sell and Ring DNA and these different technologies that are out there. But I mean, back then we literally had a landline, right? I mean, I still have one on my desk today just because that's what I started with. That's what I'm comfortable with. But, you had your 21 calls a day that were supposed to be actual conversations, right? So,
21, man, that's low.
It is low, right? When you think about it. But that was supposed to be 21 conversations, right? So if you had to make 60 dials, $100 to get to your 21 conversations, that's where the 21 number came from.
What was the connect rate back then, you think, if you can remember? Like, how many calls did it take to get a connect?
A lot less. Right. I don't even know if we were running reports at that point in time as far as the connect rate and things like that, right? The technology wasn't necessarily out there to do that. But I mean, just knowing from today when I pick up the phone and make a call versus back then, I mean, to your point on the 21, maybe I had to make 40 dials to get my 21 conversations just because you were calling directly into somebody's direct line, right? Back then, there wasn't as much, I mean, email was there, but it wasn't as much of the tool as it is today. And so, a lot of times you were getting direct pickups. So yeah, it was definitely a lot better back then, a lot easier to make those connections versus what we have today.
Wow, that's crazy. So same thing at FedEx, like a lot of activity. Anything else that stands out on like what you did to excel there that you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, I'd say the one thing, if I can point back to, because it was all phone sales, right? I may have had the opportunity to go into territory once a year, right? Based off of where budgets were for the year. But it was primarily phone sales. 99% of the time was phone sales. So I'd say probably the listening skills at that point in time were something that I started to work on and pick up on, because you're calling somebody that's already using UPS or DHL or whatever the other services were at that point. And a lot of them look at you as just a commodity sale, right? So really listening to them, figuring out, I can do a 30-minute later pickup time. That's important to you. You're willing to pay the same price or maybe even a little bit more because you can get an extra 30 packages a day out the door, which obviously increases your sales. So it's really listening and trying to figure out what the value was that I provided versus just calling up and trying to give them a better price sheet. So listening would probably be the main thing I'd point to there, just be on the phone all day.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Yeah, listening, taking notes intently, trying to really understand the personas and what they need and want. That's awesome, man. And you were there for like 8 years, right?
That's a long time, right?
I mean, congrats, right? Like, I feel like nowadays everyone moves around every few years, but so you were there for 8 years. Any advice to stay somewhere long and not try to jump ship sooner?
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason that I stayed as long as I did is, there's probably a couple of different reasons, right? So first of all, I was young in my career. I was in Pittsburgh at the time. The job market in Pittsburgh has changed a lot now. I think it's a lot better than it was back then. So to be honest, I didn't have a ton of options that I thought were going to be better options than what I had at that point in time. But I also had a fairly clear career trajectory there at FedEx, right? So at FedEx at that point in time, you went from inside sales to field sales. And then from field sales, you would probably go to corporate sales and then up into essentially worldwide sales. And so because I had that trajectory, I think that's what allowed me to stay, because I saw that I had a path forward.
You saw the ladder.
Exactly. And so I didn't feel like I was trapped. Yeah, exactly. Awesome. I didn't feel like I was trapped. I didn't feel like it was a dead end job, right? I didn't feel like I was going to be an SDR for the rest of my career. I knew there was a trajectory there.
That's a great secret for sales leaders, right? Like, make sure, if you're developing SDR teams or AE teams, make sure people know the growth trajectory of like where to start and where they could end throughout that, because it sounds like that's what worked for you.
Very much so. And the way that it worked at that point in time was you didn't necessarily work for your field sales representative, but there was a lot of overlap, right? And so it was segmented by the size of the client. So I'd have a lot of interaction with my field sales representative, So it also gave me a sense of what was there for me when I was able to make that jump myself, right? Because you talk to them and there you are in the office from 7:30 to 4, 7 to 4:30, grinding it out. Meanwhile, they're playing golf on Friday afternoon saying like, hey man, like I got done what needed to get done. I kicked ass this week. Like now I can go golfing on Friday afternoon. So you got a sense of what it looked like to be in that position.
That's sick. So then you decide to make the switch, right? You decide how'd you get the opportunity at Amex?
Yeah, it's, I don't know that it's necessarily a funny story, but for me, it's an interesting story because whether people believe in karma or just things happen for a reason. But yeah, I mean, I'd been at FedEx for 8 years, right? I'd felt like I'd kind of tapped out my potential as far as what I wanted to do there. As I mentioned earlier, that pyramid kind of got smaller, right? So the higher you got in the organization, the less number of accounts you got to work with, which just didn't interest me, right? Working with like one global client. So,
right. And those sales cycles are long and you got to build relationships with like the different divisions and departments and all of that. I used to do that at IBM Interactive. It's tough.
Yeah, it can be a grind for you unless that's what you want to do. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be more, right, not necessarily transactional, but kind of a mixture between transactional and strategic, little quicker sales cycles. So I actually played on a co-ed soccer team at the time, and there were a couple guys that I played with there, and a couple of guys knew that I was in sales, and just randomly one of them reached out to me and texted me and said, hey, I just got a recruiter from Amex reaching out to me. I'm not really in the market, but is this something you're interested in? So I'm like, yeah, that would be awesome, man. Sounds great. So essentially connect up with the hiring manager at that point through a random kind of connection through the recruiter, go and meet with them. Younger guy, completely non-traditional interviewing style. We essentially meet for coffee, like at his condo or whatever. He's asking me all the questions that you're never supposed to ask somebody from an HR perspective, right? Like, oh, how old are you? You married? What, trying to get a sense of my drive and where I'm coming from. Because I think at that point in time, I was 32, right? I was working at FedEx, doing essentially an account management role. And he's kind of looking at me because Amex was straight up new business, right? We had no MDRs. We had we literally had zero marketing dollars coming from corporate to support the corporate card product at that point in time. All the marketing dollars went into the personal cards and the small business cards. And so it was all cold calling, partnerships, networking. And so he's trying to figure me out like, hey man, you're 32 at this point. Like if you were going to be a true go-getter and a true hustler, wouldn't you have already kind of done it at this point? I'm like, hey man, like there's a lot of potential still left in this tank. Let's do this thing. And so that's how the opportunity came. Convinced he and his manager that I should be a good fit for the position and was able to lock it down. So,
dude, that's awesome. So you lock it down and then walk us through, how was it? Because you were there almost 5 years, roughly 5 years, which is awesome. Amex, again, I hear the same thing. Like I hear that they've got a really awesome kind of sales team, sales training. I don't know how the experience was for you, but I'd be curious to learn more of how that went.
Yeah, I'm really lucky to have worked for the guy that I did there because he was very non-traditional, really went outside the norms of the normal training, corporate training program. Because they gave us a whole binder, right? That, if you were to read that thing front to back, would probably take you 3 or 4 weeks on product and how you do this and how you do that. I think within 18 hours of getting hired, I was on the phone making cold calls. And so first day I was there, I got hired the same day as another individual.
I love that, dude.
Yeah.
Literally like right away, boom, done, making cold calls.
Yeah. So first day I get hired, we have lunch together. He pretty much runs us through our talk track, right? Like, hey, this job is really simple. Here's what we do here. Here's the value we provide. Here's the people we call. He's like, all right, like there's your training. Go home, get on hoovers.com, find your top 25 prospects and just start dialing. Call me at the end of the day. Let me know how it goes. And so
it's awesome.
And he stayed really involved, right? So even though we were remote and I was at home in the office, we talked. I mean, we must have talked probably 8 to 10 times a day for the first probably 6 months, right? Just, hey, just made a cold call or just talked to this guy. Here's how it went. Here's what I said. Like just role playing and going back and forth across. Okay, well, here's what you may have wanted to say here. Did you think about saying this? And so for me, because it was non-traditional, it was awesome, right? It was on the job training, role playing, and I learned probably the most that I've learned in sales in those first 2 years that I worked on that team.
And you think it was because those secrets there of why you learned the most? Number one, being forced to learn the script and just go right away.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
That, and then it sounds like the role playing too, right?
Yeah, role playing was huge, right? And we didn't really even call it role playing, but it was just that our entire team had a great relationship, right? So if I wasn't talking to my manager, I was talking to one of my colleagues, right? Like, hey, I just got off the phone with this guy. I was on the phone with him for 20 minutes, but still couldn't lock down a meeting. Do you mind kind of going through it with me, seeing what maybe I could have done differently, something like that. And I mean, we'd call our manager and leave voicemails for him, right? Because leaving voicemails and trying to get a call back was a big part of our business. And luckily for me, I was calling with a brand like Amex. So it was a little bit easier to get some folks to call you back. But yeah, I mean, we would call and leave voicemails, right? And he'd call us back and be like, hey, I listened to your voicemail. Here's what I'm hearing. Here's what I'm not hearing. Let's do this.
I love that. It's a great way to do it. Like, don't be scared of working with your peers or your management team to maximize sales. I love that. So getting thrown into it is a secret. Just literally teach and have them execute right away. Role play, record the calls. Anything else that stands out as far as like sales secrets that the audience can learn from that helped you maximize your success there?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I would look back at as well is we just kept things super simple, right? So like I mentioned, the binder that they gave you as a new hire, and the fact that it could probably take me 4 weeks to read through it. Literally, our meetings were held with what we called a bullet card, which was literally like a little 3x6 card that we would slide across the desk to the CEO or executive we were meeting with 3 bullet points on it. And literally within 30 seconds, we'd say, hey man, know you're busy. I'm going to get right to it if that's okay with you. No rapport building, no nothing. Completely non-traditional, right? Because everybody tells you, hey, you got to like see the picture on the wall with the fish and the kids playing soccer.
Yeah.
And I mean, when you're calling on CEOs, presidents, business owners, they're busy, right? So a lot of them
there's no time. If you try to bullshit with me like that, I just don't have time.
Yeah. And
there's no time.
And you say that to some people and they look at you like you're crazy, but most of those men and women really respected the fact that you were there to do business. You respected their time. And a lot of times what would happen is at the end of the meeting, if you showed them business value and you built business rapport, they would actually start building personal rapport with you. And so at the end of the meeting, right, if I show them, hey, right, like we're going to do this program, more than likely I'm going to give you 30 to 50 grand tax free at the end of the year. I'm ready to leave the meeting and they're asking me like, oh, where are you from? How long have you been in town? What do you do on the weekends? They're trying to build personal rapport with me because I've shown them value and I've created that business rapport with them.
Dude, that's awesome. That's great. So go right into the pitch and be concise is probably a secret there then, right? Like know your persona, know how to pitch them and roll with it.
Very much so. And the other thing I would add to that, Brandon, is just keep it simple, right? Because like I mentioned, that binder, right? Again, similar to FedEx, Amex probably had hundreds of products that we could walk into an office and try and talk to somebody about. But to your point, we went concise. We knew our persona. We knew what we were selling. And we went in with one product and one product alone and said, hey, here's how you as the business owner are going to get the most value out of us working together. Let's do this. And so that simple, concise message really made it easy for us as salespeople to just move forward and drive home versus getting into this long, elongated sales process of, well, you got these 100 products. I don't know what's good for me, or I don't know what's going to work. We need to evaluate and we need to see another proposal. Literally at the end of 30 minutes, or a lot of times even 15 minutes, that business owner was going to tell me, yes, I'll do this, or no, I won't. And normally when they say yes, they would actually be my advocate within the organization at that point. And when the owner of the business tells the person in accounting, hey, you're going to work with Brian on getting this project done, this is important to me, you don't have a whole lot of pushback from the people that are a little lower in that process, right? So made it kind of easy to drive things home.
That's awesome. Keep it simple. I love it. We preach that all the time internally, and it's interesting. Like our SDRs definitely try to complicate things. It's like, dude, don't worry about all the other bullshit. Like, it's simple. Get your lead list, build your lead list using Seamless or whatever else the audience uses, and then execute the calls, the emails, social activity, and make sure that you keep doing as much as possible every single day. Keep the pitch simple, keep the prospecting simple, keep the activity up, and roll. That's awesome, man. And then, you know, any other kind of final tips about selling for Amex before we jump into Concur, which was the next big thing for you?
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would share there, Brandon, is the other thing that we did is because we were selling to those executives, right? And that was really our approach, is going back to the veto selling, right? Very important top officer. We used that a lot. And so because we were normally aiming to meet with the executive or business owner, the other thing I'd share is what we try to do really well is gain the buy-in from them and then try and get that essentially mutual respect contract, right? Where it's like, hey, Brandon, we're going to do this program. You've agreed. It seems to make sense. I'm going to go and work with Betty and AP to get it up and running. If I have any issues with Betty or we run into any challenges, because that's normally where we're going to see this program fail, is that Betty says she's too busy or she has other things on her plate. Do I have permission to come back to you in 2 weeks and rehash this conversation and make sure that we're on track to deliver the value to you that I told you I could? Are we on the same page there? And if we had that conversation with that executive, so many more times that sale would be successful, not just on the initial yes, but actually getting business from that individual and actually having a great, valuable partnership together.
Yeah, I love that. I remember my father, when he was selling for CA Technologies, he took CA to the first software company to do $1 billion in software sales. And the first book that I think I remember ever seeing on his desk was like, he probably had a shitload. That was the first one I remember, was veto selling or whatever it was. Like the cover looks old school and like the big veto, like what does it stand for?
Very
again?
important top officer.
Very important top officer. Yeah. That's so funny. Damn, that's cool. And you said like that secret there was asking for permission to follow up on the deal if something stalls, or like, how would you classify that secret?
There's probably different names for it. I think I've heard some people call it kind of a mutual respect contract or some kind of a
respect contract,
right?
That's
where it's awesome. Like, hey, we've agreed to do this. I've agreed that I can deliver X amount of dollars in value for you, right? You've agreed that you want me to do that for you. For me to do that for you, I'm going to go and work with Betty. But if Betty doesn't want to work with me, I can't deliver the value that I've told you I can. So do I have permission to come back to you in 2 weeks or 3 weeks? If that's not happening, and essentially come back to you and get your support in making that happen.
Yeah, I love that. Mutual respect contract. It sounds like it sets the expectations. It sets the ground framework. Like, this is what we can do for you. This is what I am going to do for you. If these people throw us off, I'm coming back and we're going to work this out and we're going to get this done.
Very much so. And that's one example of it. I mean, I've seen people use it really well, even in the initial sale as well, right? Where you're working with the right decision maker, but the decision maker tells you, hey, Brandon, we're evaluating these 3 other technologies, or we're doing some other technology implementation right now. I really love your product, but right now is just not the right time, right? You can use that same mutual respect contract to say, hey, Brandon, completely understand. I want to work with you on your timeline, but tell me, when you and I follow up in 8 weeks or 3 months or whatever you've asked me to follow up with you on, what's going to be different? Right? Like, So when I call you in 3 months and nothing's changed, you're essentially going to have lost 3 months of value that I could have provided you already. And we're going to be back at square one. So, right. You can use that mutual respect contract in other ways besides just the, hey, if this project falls off track, do I have permission to come back to you? It can even be in that initial sale of, hey, I know I can provide you value, but I need your help in doing so.
Yep. Yeah, I love that. That's awesome, man. That's awesome. So you have this successful career at Amex, which is awesome. And then you get an opportunity to get out of like selling the savings, expense management, liability technology, right, at Amex to Concur. And I think you were there before and after the SAP acquisition, right?
I actually came in just a little bit after the acquisition. So even though the acquisition had happened, there hadn't really been a whole lot of change that had happened to the organization itself. And one of the things that that SAP's done a really good job of with Concur is really allowing Concur to run fairly autonomously within their own environment, right? Allowing that same culture, allowing the same things that made them successful to begin with to continue forward. So
it's awesome, man. What made you decide to join Concur from Amex?
Yeah, so I'd been at Amex for 5 years, right? I mean, my next step there was to either look at management or look somewhere else, right? And so I'm selling payment solutions, essentially. I'm living in Austin, Texas. I'm looking around.
Which I heard is awesome, by the way.
It is awesome. Feel free to visit. Just don't move here.
Why don't you?
I think we already have like 120 people a day moving here. So
you're like, dude,
but hey, man.
I've got a wakeboarding boat, and I heard the rivers of the lakes over there.
It's awesome, man. I mean, I'm making fun about the people moving here, but it is awesome. That's why people are moving here. You can go hiking, running, be on the lake all in the same day. So it's an awesome city from a leisure perspective, but also from a business perspective, right? So, backtrack 3.5 years. And Austin's been on the tech scene kind of map for a while now.
Oh, huge. There's a lot of VCs, tons of startups. Like it's blown up, absolutely blown up.
Yeah. So I'm sitting here working for a payment solution provider. I feel like I've had a good run. I've learned a lot. Essentially the way that I got introduced is a lot of times Amex and Concur would partner together, right? So if a company had a card program with 100 cards out there, well, you need a reconciliation tool to actually do the expense management reconciliation of those card transactions. So a lot of times Amex would refer Concur in to deals to actually work with those companies. So I knew the local Concur rep pretty well. He's like, hey, we have a spot open on the team. And so I'm like, hey, if I'm going anywhere in Austin, it should be into technology, right? And this should be a decent first step, right? Because I know a lot of companies now are like, hey, if you don't have SaaS experience, go find some SaaS experience and come back and talk to us. So the fact that I kind of had a foot, if not a leg in the door with Concur was kind of an easy way for me to get myself into the tech world and kind of go down that road.
That's sick, man. So was it hard to get in with no SaaS experience?
Well, luckily for me, because I had the relationships through the partnership, I think I was able to pretty easily overcome that lack of SaaS experience. But now that I've been here for a while, seeing who we hire and kind of the process that we go through to hire people, I would say if you don't have those relationships that you've formed already, if you were just to come off the street and try and get a job here, having some level of technology SaaS experience definitely helps. We see a lot of people come from payroll providers because we know they're hustlers, right? Like ADP, Paycom, Paychex. A lot of those people come over because they have some level of technology experience, right? Selling to the HR type solution, and they're not afraid to bang on doors. So I see a lot of those folks getting hired here at Concur.
That's awesome, man. So you get in the door, and then walk me through it. Never done SaaS before. Was it hard to get ramped? What were some of the things that you did? What were some of the top secrets, sales secrets, strategies, best practices that you could share from your experience with Concur?
Yeah. So to go to your question about was it hard to get ramped? It didn't seem like it was hard to get ramped, but my numbers would tell you that it was very hard to get ramped. I mean, I did not do well my first year. I'll just put my first year was a complete bomb. I figured, hey man, I know Concur, I use Concur, should be pretty easy to sell this stuff, right? But yeah, my first year just bomb it out. And so have to do some self-reflection, some self-evaluation going into year 2, figure out, okay, what are the areas that I can get better, right? Do I need to pull other reps in to help coach me up, right? So I had to really do some self-evaluation on what can I do as an individual to get better here. And so in year 2, right, I'd qualified for President's Club, so I was able to turn the ship around there last year.
Dude, that's huge. Huge. Yeah. What when you did and I love when people talk about like their struggles, because a lot of people will try to use this facade of like it was perfect.
Yeah.
Like, dude, I've made millions and lost millions, and like I learned the most when I get my ass kicked and lost millions. So like I love that you were just so honest there, with like, dude, first year got my ass kicked. What do you think what did you not do that first year? Looking back.
Yeah, so Concur was the first organization that I worked for that actually had, we call them MDRs. I know a lot of people call them SDRs or BDRs, right? But we have an MDR team, market development reps. First organization I'd ever worked for that actually had a lead generation system, right, that was supposed to flow me leads. So first thing I'd point to is I took my eye off the ball with my own activity level, right?
Yeah, it's easy to do because you're like, oh, my MDR team will just take care of me.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the first thing, just from an activity level perspective. The other thing looking back is I think I was talking about a lot of products and features and not necessarily what that meant to the prospect, right? So like, oh, hey, we do this, we do that. Like, isn't this awesome? Like, here's my demo. Isn't this the best demo ever? And that's all great, right? And they'd be like, oh, yeah, this is cool, Brian. But I couldn't always tie it back to value or to what it meant to that individual, right? Whether it was a CFO or an AP manager or whoever I'm talking to, I wasn't always able to tie it back, provide that business case or that ROI on, hey, I know you thought the demo was cool. Here's why this should be important to you. And here's why it's important to our other 50,000 clients. Does that make sense to you? Right? So I don't think I did a very good job of seeing and providing the why versus the product or the benefit.
Yeah. The same thing happened to me when I was selling mobile marketing, like to B2B companies for the first time. My second company that I lost millions, like I would do the features and benefits, like, hey, check out this widget, check out this thing, check out that. And barely sold anyone. I mean, like 50 customers and we should have sold 1,000. So I get that. So then the second year you're like, hey, how did you know to tie it to value and ROI though? Did you like shadow people, or like how did you figure out those things were holding you back?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was shadowing some of the top performing reps. And so that was one of the first things I did, right? So Concur, just like every other sales organization, has an SKO, right, at the beginning of the year. And so as part of that SKO, I reached out to, I think, probably the top 5 or 10 reps across the country. I'm like, hey, I need 5 or 10 minutes coming up. Ignite is what we call our SKO. I'm like, hey, I need 5 or 10 minutes at Ignite this coming year. You know, you mind giving it to me? So I sat down with, 5, 6, 7 people and just said, hey man, like I struggled mightily last year. What are you doing differently? And just really tried to get, 2 or 3 key points from each of those individuals. And those are some of the things that I came back with, is really that business case, that ROI, things like that. And so then I would, let my manager know, hey, this is what I'm working on. This is what I heard from talking with these top performers. I'd have colleagues sit down with me and shadow me, and not even join the call, right? But just fly on a wall, shadow me. And then after the call, give me some critiques. Hey, you seem to be focusing on this a lot, right? You're saying this a lot or not saying this. I feel like there was an opportunity to really drive home, right? Like, hey, Jim, you told me this was really important to you, and you get to that point in the demo, like make sure you pause there. Right? Like, hey, Jim, do you understand why this is important to you, what I just showed you? Yes, I get the fact that this is going to save me $200,000 a year or whatever that is, right? And so, yeah, it was through that overall process of taking a step back, right? Taking the lump, telling people I didn't succeed, saying, hey, I need help. How can you help me? What areas could I improve on? And then trying to get a process around it, right? Trying to figure out, KPIs or OKRs, whatever you want to call them, right? That I then needed to stick to, and then trying to get some evaluation through the deal, right? So if I'm doing an initial meeting, hey, do you mind jumping on with me for a couple of initial meetings? See what you're hearing.
Was it hard to get them to jump on the meetings with you?
No, I mean, the good thing was I had a couple pretty good buddies on the team, right? Because I mean, a lot of times on a sales team, it's like everybody's doing their own thing, right? And yeah, whenever you're all in the office together grabbing a beer, everybody's close. But at the end of the day, right, when it comes to work Monday through Friday, it's like, hey man, like I'm working my deals.
Yeah.
I'm working my deals. I'm making my calls. I got my time blocked. I got to pick my kid up at 4. So I had a couple of good buddies that were willing to, help me out there. And I was able to form some relationships that they were willing to jump on, give me some pointers. I think it's also important to let your manager know, hey, I didn't come anywhere near not only the company goal last year, but my personal goals, right? Like, here's how you can help me help you, right? Because obviously a manager doesn't want, somebody performing in the bottom 30% of the company. They want somebody that they can just let go and perform and make sure, know that they're going to deliver a number every month. So let your manager know, hey, here are the things that I'm working on. Do you mind jumping on an intro meeting with me, letting me know if I'm improving on these 3 things? And you don't have to have the greatest, your sales manager doesn't have to be the greatest salesperson, to just be a sounding board or be almost a mirror for you to say, hey, here's what I'm working on. Can you help me with it?
I love that, man. I love, the secret of like being vulnerable in sales, like making yourself vulnerable, making yourself open to feedback and being coached. Like, you have to put your ego aside. That's hard to do. Like, hey, like nowhere near where I want to be. What can I do differently to maximize sales? I need your coaching. I need your help. I need your support.
Yeah, I think that's key. I mean, not to get too far off track, but if you or your listeners haven't read it, Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday is a great book.
Damn. Awesome. I haven't read it, but I 1000% agree.
Yeah.
I coach my team all the time. I'm like, dude, on a scale of 1 to 10, I score myself a 1 out of 10 in everything I do forever, because I got egotistical and went broke, like not listening to anyone, not trying to learn, not trying to improve. But luckily for me, that happened when I was like 22. So like, tell me a little bit about Ego is the Enemy.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's really, he ties it back to a lot to, like Roman philosophers and that kind of stuff, and going all the way back to like Marcus Aurelius. But it's really just identifying that, hey, like you said, right? Like when you realize that you're doing something for yourself or selfishly, you probably need to take a step back, realize it's your ego. It's really kind of getting you there, and just make sure that you're acting from the best place.
Wow. That's amazing, man. So you turn it around, right? You turn it around at Concur, and any other top secrets that you have from selling, in SaaS for the first time to where you're at today, and then we'll lead into your top sales secret, which I'm excited to talk about.
From an actual sales process perspective, I would just say be curious, right? Like, be curious, kind of go back to that listening thing I was talking about earlier, like listening to your prospects, listening to your clients, really trying to understand why things work one way or another. Because that's one of the things about what I sell and what a lot of us sell, right, is most of them aren't must-haves, right? If you're selling payroll, 98% of companies out there need payroll, right?
Yep.
Companies don't need an expense management system, right? It's really a nice to have. So really listening and trying to find a way, again, back to that ROI and that value to really tie back to what's important to them, right? And that's one thing I would point back to when I worked at FedEx. They actually did a really good job of ongoing training. And one of the things that they did is they actually had us go through like a P&L of a company and trying to figure out how, as a shipping company, we could actually impact different parts of the P&L, right? And so you're actually trying to figure out like, okay, if I'm talking to a marketing manager, why do they care about shipping, right? And so it really helped me learn and understand the end result of what my product does or is, right? So if I'm talking to the CEO of a company who's like, Brian, I don't care about expense reports. I don't care about travel bookings. I'm like, well, do you care about the fact that you're presenting yourself as one of the most innovative companies in the country today or in Austin today, but yet when you hire somebody, they come in and they have to submit an Excel spreadsheet expense report? Like, Do I have any numbers around the retention rate or things like that? Maybe not, but just thinking about it in terms of that, right? Where it's like, why does it matter to the CEO, to the CFO? The CFO obviously is numbers based, so the CFO is going to talk a lot about money. But hey, if I'm talking to the VP of sales, hey, right, like when your sales team at noon on Friday decides they're going to spend the next 2 hours filling out an expense report versus making those extra 10 dials, what does that mean to your business? What does that mean to your numbers? Right. So trying to make these connections. Yeah. So trying to make those connections and tie the dots together. That would really be what I say. It's just that curiosity.
I love that. Being curious as much as possible. That's awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you sharing like your experience in sales from swinging and dealing insurance back in the day for your mom's company to, hitting up FedEx to Amex to Concur. And, now we're at the point of the show where the audience, loves to hear, hey, if you had to go back in time, if Brian Potter had to go back in time to when you first started in sales and you could only give yourself one sales secret, one top piece of sales advice to maximize sales, increase revenue, and, augment your potential dramatically, what would your top sales secret be?
Yeah, it's a tough one, right? When you need to boil it down to that one, right?
Yeah, you got to take the universe and boil it. It's tough.
Yeah, so I'd probably tie in with that curiosity piece that I just talked about. And so I'm big on knowing your numbers, but even more than that, I would say knowing your customer, right? So I talk to salespeople all the time and I'm like, oh, what do you do? Who do you sell to? And I'm like, oh, we sell to everybody, right? And you ask them, oh, well, what was the last big deal you sold? Oh, ABC company. Oh, what do they do? I don't know. I couldn't even tell you what they do. I know they bought my product. Okay, cool. Like you got a sale in, but really knowing your customer, knowing what their business does, knowing what each of the personas within that business does, like that would be my number one secret, is just being super curious, finding out if you're selling into CFOs, what's the day of a CFO look like, right? Like what's important to them? Do they really care about XYZ, or do they actually care about going into that board meeting next week and having to answer to the board about why their earnings aren't where they're supposed to be, right? Or where this isn't where it's supposed to be. Well, figure out how you can help that CFO not sweat during the board meeting, right? Not always easy, but if you can do that and you can figure out what's important to the different personas in the companies that you sell to, your job's going to be a lot easier versus just trying to make $100 a day and tell somebody, hey, I do ABC, do you want to buy it? Right? Like those days are kind of gone at this point. So
that's awesome. So be curious about the persona and try to really understand what they care about, their responsibilities, their goals, their KPIs. I love that advice. How do you learn those things? Like, because I like to go into what is the secret, why is it important, and how to execute. Like, how would the audience now know, hey, I got to learn my personas really intently? Where should we start?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing would be is, let's say you come into a new job, right? New company, and you're doing exactly that, Brandon, right? Hey, okay, I know these are my three main personas that I sell to. I need to figure out what they do, what's important to them. Hopefully you have a client base, right? Unless you're doing a startup with an unaddressed market, hopefully you've got a client base or somebody that's already using your product. Call them up, right? Hey, Brandon, you're using my product today. I'd love to grab coffee with you if we're local, or I'd love to just, get a meeting going for 5 minutes where I can pick your brain on, why did you buy our product? What did it mean to you? Like, what were the struggles that you had before it? What did that mean to you in your position? And why is it important to you for somebody in your position to have this, or what did it do for you? So ask those people. I'd also say, try and get involved with some local organizations of those personas, right? You're not always going to have an open door to walk into, say, a CFO alliance, right? If you sell into CFOs or something like that, where you can just walk in as a salesperson and get access. But more than likely, they're going to have some free content on their website or something like that, where you can start to get a sense of, oh, okay, they're doing a webinar on tax something or other, right? Like that must be important to them. So there's definitely resources, especially with everything that's out there today from a content, Google. I mean, if you can't find information today, you're doing something wrong.
Right. I mean, we built a platform that automates all of it and gets it all for you instantly. It's like you've got Seamless.AI, you've got Google, you've got LinkedIn, you've got so everyone. The good news for us, our business blew up because everyone posts everything about them online.
Yeah.
Like shit, I go live and post on LinkedIn and all these other social media sites 50 million times a day. There's just so much data about people now. Well, it's probably a lot different than when you were selling for FedEx back in the day. Like, nowadays there's so much content out there that you could research those personas so fast and know everything about the contact and everything about the company instantly, get it into Salesforce, and then you're off to the races. So I love that advice. Just you got to research, you got to find it, learn it, everything you need to know about your persona, and then you could customize all your messaging, customize your pitch. It sounds like you had mentioned, customize the value, customize the ROI case, and you're off to the races.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I think it goes back to also to once you do all that research, right, you're going to find all this information out there, right? If you were to ask a CFO, what do they do throughout the month? I mean, they're going to come back with literally 37 different responsibilities they have. Well, if you want to try and make it clear and concise, try and narrow that down to 2 or 3 that you can then include in your messaging, right? So you now have 2 to 3 key things where it's like, hey, Brandon, right, as an award-winning CFO locally, more than likely you're struggling with these 3 things, or these are 3 challenges that you're running into today. Do any of those resonate with you? Is that something we can schedule 10 minutes to talk more about, right? So that way you're able to customize it, probably hit home on something that's important to them, but also not get overwhelmed with analysis paralysis of, well, I've got these 37 talking points. Which one do I do today?
Yeah. And that goes back to what you learned at Amex, right?
Yeah.
The note card with the three things, the 3
Yeah.
bullets. Just, you only need 3 things, like the rule of 3. Just find out 3 important things that you could combine and use to pitch, it sounds like.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Well, Brian, I appreciate it. So get to know your personas. I'm sorry. No, it was, the secret is be curious to get intimate with your personas.
In the appropriate way.
Yeah. Be curious, get curious with your personas. I don't know. We'll come up with a badass title for it for the book. But no, that's awesome, man. I really appreciate the advice. I really appreciate you sharing your sales experience, everything that you learned from selling insurance to selling for FedEx to American Express to Concur. I'm excited to watch your journey and see where the next few years lead you and what you do. And I know you're starting to go on the speaking tour, which is awesome, man. Congrats with that. That should be really exciting. And where can the audience learn from you, connect with you, and follow you for more?
Yeah, probably the main platform would be LinkedIn. I'm on there. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I'm trying to do a little bit more from a posting and video and everything else that we're all supposed to be doing on a weekly basis on LinkedIn. So that would be the main place to find me.
Awesome. Yeah. So go on LinkedIn, Brian Potter. You'll find him, Austin, Texas, regional sales executive at Concur. And thank you again so much, Brian, for sharing all of your amazing knowledge and depth of experience with us and all your top sales secrets. And thank you, audience, for joining us for Sales Secrets from the Top 1%, where the world's best sales experts share their secrets to sales success. Pick up a copy of the book at secretsalesbook.com, secretsalesbook.com. That's secretsalesbook.com. And you can also tune into the show on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and LinkedIn, where we post weekly episodes for the show on the world's top sales executives sharing their top secrets to sales success. So everyone, take these sales secrets, apply them today to maximize sales, and tune in for future episodes and pick up a copy of the book. Thank you again, Brian, so much for all of your time. We appreciate you.